Is sturgeon fishing on the Columbia doomed? Hold on, I've got more information.
The Columbia River and Pacific Ocean offer multiple bucket list fishing opportunities. I study them closely and am constantly learning and revising my techniques. Every time I leave the dock, it is my goal to help my clients have the best day possible. It doesn't matter if your goal is to catch and cook, catch and release, or explore the beauty and history of our area. My name is Jared. I'm captain at River Wanderer Outdoors. What you're seeing now is my morning commute, and I would be honored to help you bring home memories to share.
Shadow and I have had a chance to take a look at this little bit of light reading. There you are. Now everyone knows that you're not a figment of my imagination. So we have a little bit of light reading here from what's known as the Joint Columbia River Management Staff. This is a group of basically biologists. They work for ODF&W, WDF&W, and their job is to just collect information to make sure that we don't run afoul of things like the Endangered Species Act and those sorts of things. And so they do a lot of reports. Most of the stuff most of us pay attention to from their work has to do with salmon. But in this case, we just got the annual report on our sturgeon stocks. And, well, there's some kind of good news, kind of bad news. If you live around the John Day Pool, you got nothing but bad news. If you live McNary, Bonneville Pool, not horrible, but also not super great for the long term. If you live below Bonneville like me, we are going to be in it for a long time right now on catch and release only, and hopefully we'll be able to hang on to that. Right now, the good news is we have just over 90,000 fish below Bonneville. In the main stem Columbia, not a bad number really, right? 90,000 fish sounds like a lot of fish hanging out there. Those fish are going to come in and out from the ocean into the river, come up through the estuary. Some of those are spawners. A lot of those are spawners, actually. Matter of fact, 60% of them are spawners. It's good for having a solid spawning population, but remember, sturgeon can live over 100 years. So what that means then is and that number, by the way, though, is down from 110,000 last year, which isn't good because we didn't fish on them. Commercial guys didn't fish on them. The tribes didn't fish on them. That's just the difference between what we had the year before and what either got eaten by sea lions, died of old age, or went out the ocean to go wherever. So let me just go ahead and start diving into probably what I thought was the most concerning issue here. And this is part of the slow motion train wreck that's been our sturgeon fishery below Bonneville for, well, since 2010, really. So we're talking 16 years. This problem could actually drive itself to work right now if it had a driver's license. And that big problem right now is survival of baby sturgeon. It's what they call recruitment. So recruitment means how many new fish are coming in to a particular fishery on a particular day or on a particular year, right? So they say recruitment in terms of how many new ones are arriving into the system or emerging in this. So our problem, though, is that they've not been successfully spawning in the last several years down in the lower Columbia. Our numbers have been going down. I'll put a graph up here that's going to show the number of sturgeon in that legal size that's been going down, but also that first category of fish. But what's even more disturbing, though, let me see if I can get it here in this packet. So what's most disturbing, though, is this chart right here, and I'll put it up on the screen there so that you guys can see it. But what this chart does is it shows the age distribution of our population of sturgeon. And this thing starts all the way back, like I said, all the way back in 2010. When you look at it here, you've got a pretty big bump of fish here on the left-hand side. Those are all our little ones. We expect a lot of those little sturgeon to not survive. They're going to get eaten by otters. They're going to get eaten by other fish. They're going to get eaten by seals and sea lions. They're going to get eaten by all sorts of things out there, right? They're just going to get in trouble. They're going to get washed out to the ocean. Something's going to happen to those fish as they go through. So we expect to lose a lot of those fish. So you would expect to see a large number of younger fish and a much smaller number of adult-sized fish. So as you look here in 2010, that's about what you really want to see that population look like. As we move forward, though, that population starts really declining. So remember in 2010, if you look at that number, we had 190,000 legal size fish. And those are not the big bulk of our fish, right? The bulk of our fish are should be those sublegal fish, because that's your new generation coming in. You get to 2011, that sublegal population gets cut in half, just cut off at the top. 2012 goes down even further. 2013 comes back a little bit. 2014, it starts going back down again. 15 down further, a little bit of recovery in 16, down in 17, further down in 18. At 19, it's barely a speed bump. 2020, they had some issues with their sampling there. So, we had a bunch of other stuff going on in 2020. 2021, that thing's just getting flat. And by the time you get to this year, our recruitment for the lower Columbia River and the lower Willamette River combined, so basically the Falls at Oregon City down and Bonneville down, was precisely 0 fish. 0. They detected no successful first of year fish. These are fish that basically made it through the first 2 months of life after spawning. 0. All of those river miles, nothing's there. They ran their seines, they ran their test nets, they ran their test sets with hooks on the line, with set hooks. Nothing. Not a single one of those fish were in that first year spawning. That means our spawning this last year was completely unsuccessful, complete failure. Not only did we have that problem below Bonneville and below the Oregon City Falls, the John Day Pool also had 0. But the John Day Pool hasn't had really a successful spawn since about 2013. The only thing saving us right now is the fact that these sturgeon can live to be 100 years old. So what does that mean, right? We've got 90,000 fish plus, counting the older ones, the ones that are really out there able to spawn. We probably have 120,000 fish out there. Our population can bounce back pretty quickly because each fish can put out, a first year spawning fish can put out 70,000 eggs. Easy, right? A mature spawning fish can put out 1.25 million eggs in just one spawning. And I misspoke a minute ago. That's 700,000 eggs, right? So if 1% of those survive, right, from just that one spawning and make it into that first of year category, which is actually probably about the numbers we're looking at, there's still a lot of fish. There's still a ton of fish that could come back very quickly. But the problem is we're going to need some conditions to make that happen. Now, the big question that everybody's trying to figure out is where'd they go? Why are they not here? What happened to them? There are a couple of different options. One option is we just didn't have good water conditions for spawning. The fish went up, either looked at it and said, nope, not going to do it. The conditions weren't right. Or the water was too warm for those eggs to stick. It was too warm for them or not enough oxygen or something along those lines, right? For those eggs to fertilize and stick and grow and develop. 2, the eggs hatched. The eggs went and did their thing normally and then hatched and emerged, right? And the sturgeon smolt got eaten or destroyed somehow. Late water changes, predators, those sorts of things, right? Or 3, there's something going on with the sampling. Now, the thing is, though, they've been sampling in these same locations for decades now. They have to. They have to stay at the same locations. They're supposed to do it the same number of times during those time frames in order to find those fish, right? That way they're consistent. So I don't think it was a sampling issue. So then the question is, what happened? Why did those eggs just not fertilize and hatch? Or did something eat them? Now, we know we have some predator problems on the Columbia, but I don't think this is just seals and sea lions. As much as I'd like to blame the Steller sea lions, and good Lord, we've got a ton of those, but I don't think that's the problem here, because we're also seeing those problems up on the John Day Pool. And even at Bonneville and McNary, where those problems, where they still have okay fish, it's still not great, right? It's still not super. Their populations are still not doing good as far as recruitment goes. So, and their recruitment's been down. So now we're looking at something like either water quality or we're looking at other sources of predators. So we know what eats sturgeon, right? When they're little babies, when they've just emerged, they are eaten by everything from those stinking brown sculpin, pike minnow, bass. Although bass don't seem to bother them too much. But one of the biggest eaters of our sturgeon are channel cats. Channel catfish are known to just chow down on little baby sturgeon. And the challenge for baby sturgeon is they hang out on the bottom during the day, and then at night, they lift themselves up into the water column, drift back down, and set themselves back down. They're almost back bouncing themselves down the river to disperse themselves out. So they're pretty darn vulnerable to an ambush predator that's just going to sit there, wait for something to come by, and grab it. It's exactly how channel catfish feed. It could be food availability. We've had some lower smelt runs lately. Those fish, they're opportunistic feeders. When they start out small, though, they're primarily eating things like stonefly larvae and little critters, little baby shrimp, and those sorts of things that are going on the bottom. So I'm not certain why those fish aren't making it to that first year. They aren't making it through even the first few months, the first 6 months between when they're hatched and when they get checked when they pull the seines to try and see how many of those fish are here. Now, the big question though is what the heck are we going to do about it, right? We do not have baby sturgeon making it through for the first 3 months of life in the Columbia River right now. That's just it. Like below Bonneville and in the John Day Pool, they are not making it 3 months. They're not making it 6 months. They are not making it to that young of year survey. That's sad. So what the heck are we going to do about it? Because while we have time, we are really lucky with sturgeon. We're lucky that they live for so long, right? They get about 14, 15 years old before they start breeding. And then they have 60 years of breeding to do, right? That they can do. So if we have a sturgeon that's going to spawn for 60 years, that gives us time. Unlike salmon, if we had 3 years of zero production on salmon, our runs would be gone. They'd be dead. It would take us a century to get those fish back without some sort of major hatchery project. Do we need to do sturgeon hatcheries? Idaho seems to think that's the answer. I don't know. Like we're having a hard enough time keeping capacity in our hatcheries here in Oregon and in Washington for salmon. I don't think sturgeon hatcheries are going to be on the horizon if I'm just being honest about things. So realistically, then the question is, what are we going to do about it, right? Is this a habitat issue? Is this a predation issue? It's not a fishery issue. It's not a in-river fishery issue, at least. There's been no commercial and no sport retention for sturgeon, for white sturgeon, in the Columbia below Bonneville for 3 years. And yet our production is still going down. Do we have a great catch and release fishery? Absolutely. And you could say, oh, well, maybe the catch and release fishery is interfering. But we touch less than 10% of the existing spawning population. And I can tell you right now, most of that action was either lower Willamette, right around what we call Toyota Hole, or down in the estuary below Wana, right? So it's down there. And those fish are not sitting on spawning beds. They're not getting ready to spawn. And even if they were traveling through on their way up to go spawn, and I know where those fish are because I fish on them. Most of the fish we're fishing on hang out in an area, they're residents, they move back and forth, and that's sort of that. Those are not fish heading upriver getting ready to spawn and sit on the spawning beds for the most part. So we're not really disturbing our spawning population when 92% of the fish, assuming that each fish that's caught in catch and release is only caught once, 92% of the sturgeon in the lower Columbia didn't get touched by anybody. They didn't get touched. We did not touch them. So if 92% of our spawners are going completely unmolested up the river, up to wherever they're going to go to spawn, it's not the catch and release fishery that's causing the problem. So I really do think that what we're dealing with is a predation issue or a water quality issue. One of the two. And I'm just not certain what it is. The good news is, like I said, we've got plenty of time to get this figured out, but sturgeon are also often forgotten about. Salmon take a lot of the spotlight, but our sturgeon fishery is super important. There used to be 1.1 million sturgeon between Bonneville and Astoria. 1.1, let that sink in. 1.1 million fish. And we're down to about 140,000, almost 10%. And that has happened in the last 15 years. It's not something we talk about back in the 20s and 30s when they built the dams. That's happened within the time most of us have been fishing on this river and in our own lifetimes. So hopefully we get it figured out. Hopefully there's a little bit of effort around it. Hopefully some folks decide to start moving forward, pushing some things, pushing some serious efforts to recover our sturgeon population. Because once those spawners age out, once they're gone, it takes 15 years for a spawning fish to be ready to lay her first eggs. So once we lose that population, it's going to be a while, folks, before we can start seeing legal size fish again, or we can really, and at some point, we're going to hit the tail end of our spawning population. We've got time, but the longer we wait, the longer it's going to take for these fish to recover. So I'm Jared. I wish I had better news for you. The good news is we can still fish on them. The good news is we can still have lots of fun with them. And the good news is we can do it without really hurting them or anything else. But we need to make sure that this doesn't become one of those things that we tell our grandkids about that they'll never be able to experience. Thank you very much. Hopefully next time I'll have a happier report for you.
Casting dreams just so, lines in the water, hopes on the breeze, finding peace where the soul finds ease. Together we watch the sun go down.
Exactly, go deep. It's more fun, right?
This is where our hearts belong. Grandfather's tales in the evening light, rocks beneath us, the future in sight. Casting our nets, bridging the years, finding solace, conquering fears. Together we watch the sun go down, fishing for calm in this timeless town. The river sings its ancient song. This is where our hearts belong. Passing knowledge from old unto new. The river runs, but we all make do. With laughter and love we find our way. Generations bound, come what may. Together we watch the sun go down, fishing for calm in this timeless town. The river sings its ancient song. This is where our hearts belong.
How's your arm feeling now?
Evening falls, stars above us bright, whispers of peace in the still of night. In each ripple, dreams come alive on this river. We continue to thrive together.